Welcome to Office Hours, everyone, where we answer your tech and media production questions every single day. Jason Bache in Albuquerque, New Mexico is our reader today. Jason, what's our first question?
Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies writes in my 4-cam rig, I typically use 2 PTZ Optics 1080p type cameras and 2 fixed box 1080p box. I have a potential gig coming up that is in a car's car park, so it's open to weather. Any ideas how to protect the cameras?
Jeffrey Powers, you want to start us off?
Yeah, there's 2 different ways you can do it. You can do it through the hard case way, or you can do it through a soft case way. For instance, PTZ Optics does have a recommendation for a hard case, and that's this thing right here. It is the PTZ O base that you can get. It's something that you would actually mount to a wall or a roof or something like that. So if you're going to use it and you're putting it on a pole, you'll have to figure out how to adapt it for that pole. And of course, it also depends on whether you're upside down or right side up. The biggest issue of something like this is usually if the elements get too much and the dome starts to fog up, you have to figure out ways to clean it up from there. If you want to go to the soft case version, things like the porta-brace, which that was way too big on there. Let me zoom that down a little bit. The porta-brace enclosure from there, if you're not planning to do too much movement with the PTZ, something like that works. More inexpensive version is Movo, and they have a case for different cameras and different cameras and PTZ cameras, as well as porta-brace.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, the challenge with some of the enclosures is exactly what Jeffrey pointed out, which is that you get stuff on it, rain on it, other things like that, and then you're out there trying to wipe it off, and that turns into a chain reaction. It becomes hard to deal with. A lot of times, and Mickey suggested this in the is to think about tenting them. So, and that can be a tent for the camera and the operator. A lot of times you just want to think about how far back and forth do those PTZs have to go. Are they just doing fine tuning? Because think about their range of motion and figure out how far you can go out. So if you think about your PTZ here, you want to think about having that tent as far out of here as you can, so that rain coming in or anything else is not going to hit the PTZ. So the further out you can get, and the further you can pull it back, and that, of course, that's going to reduce the angle of view that it has. But especially if it goes straight out, and so these can be tents, small tents or larger tents. If we've done stuff outside, we have a cluster of cameras in the back. We get a 10 by 10 tent. We open up one side and we kind of pull back, into it. And that has worked pretty well, assuming you don't need any sound, because it will definitely make noise. But that kind of thing. Remember that if you're in really inclement weather, just remember that tents are big sales. So you have to know what you're going to do and make sure that they are. I had a couple pretty close calls with tents. And so just remember they're going to pick up stuff going from one direction to the other. So be careful about how much you weight them down, and be conscious to how you would open them up if it became dangerous.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, exactly. As these guys said, if you can get the company to rent, that's also an option, because those enclosures are like $700, and if it's just for a one-off, I mean, the right tool for the job. So here's a recent production. Oh, let me grab the right number 4, hot punch 4. So 4, this is a Panasonic model, and you can see that it's got the windshield wiper, it's got the heating and the cooling, but this is like an $8,000 camera. And because this was a multi-day event, we didn't want to fry our operators. We just tented ourselves back here, and we're able to run audio and the PTZ controller back there. But we just rented this, so that's the thing to do, is just rent all this. So build if you haven't got the gig yet and there's enough budget, go ahead and look at building that stuff in, because it's a bummer when it's either too hot, it rains, or there's dust, especially with the PTZ Optics cameras, the fine sand that you can get inside those motors, and then you go to do your next gig, and all of a sudden it's got some hiccups in that smooth pan and tilt. So I'd be looking at renting or hiring another production company that's used to doing outdoor gigs that has all of that appropriate gear.
And David Brady in the chat says, in a pinch, use a brolly, the English term for an umbrella. And I used to have tons of them, having spent a lot of my career in Arizona where the sun was always there. I had a whole series of umbrellas and rigs for them. As to Alex's point, I never bought an umbrella after the first one where I made a mistake that didn't have venting in it to kind of cut down the wind load on it. But cheap umbrellas that can be rigged really simply can do it in a very light rainstorm. They won't work if it gets too crazy out there. Alex, you wanted to make another comment?
Yeah, and I will say that I'm notorious for renting gear, even if I own it, if I'm going to be working outside. So especially with cameras and stuff like that, I'm like, well, let's rent. I mean, you still have insurance that has to cover it, but there's a lot of damage that happens to electronics just by being in the weather. The humidity and so on and so forth, and getting wet. It's not necessarily apparent to it. And I tend to like to keep all my gear in dry spaces.
Yeah, to his point, do not keep your stuff in the air conditioning and take it out on that humid, nasty rainstorm because it'll fog up and the lenses will go nuts. Give it time to acclimate outside. All right, next question.
Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida writes in, After Effects has added 3D support for FBX. How widely available are these 3D models in the industry?
Alex Lindsay is going to help you out. Alex?
Yeah, FBX is a very, very old format, actually. It was probably the most, it came out, I want to say in the late 90s. So it's 25 years old at least. And it was designed by Motion Builder. There's some, not Motion Builder, but a company called Cadera. Cadera had a program called Filmbox. So FBX is from the name Filmbox. It was a Filmbox tool. And what it was, the first 3D format that carried animation, lighting, textures. A lot of what we think about as USD or USDZ, this was the forerunner of that. Before that, we had OBJ and we had DXF and things that were fairly limited in what they could actually do. But you could send someone a whole animation with a scene in FBX. And so it's actually a pretty robust format. And there's some translators for it, but you'll see it it's pretty common as far as FBX goes. So if you go into something like TurboSquid, you're going to see FBX as one of the options pretty often. And programs like Polycam and other things that convert your cell phone to 3D, and cell phone, you can build models with it and so on and so forth. They'll typically export FBX. It's not a new format, so it's a pretty safe one for Adobe to put into After Effects. I haven't had a chance to test it yet. Adobe's support for 3D has been in After Effects has been pretty rough. But what I will say is Substance is one of the best 3D apps out there as far as being able to texture stuff. So they, by buying Algorithmic and moving, and then all the tools that have come after Adobe bought them, they've really been moving on all cylinders. And so being able to take stuff from Substance 3D, texture it, build it, I think this is the model that they're trying to build, is you're going to be able to texture and model all of those things and bring them into After Effects and animate them and compositing them with 3D. If they do that well, it's a pretty compelling solution. We have some of that right now in Motion. Some of the challenges with Motion is that because driven towards real time, it has a little bit of aliasing, so you have to oversample to get the best quality. I think After Effects may not render as quickly, but may give us higher quality on that standard 1080p output, but I don't know until I test it. So we'll try to test it in the next couple weeks and see what we can find.
Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York asks, has anyone been experimenting with or utilizing Spacecomms? Spacecomms with a Z.io.
And we're going right back to Alex. Alex.
Yeah, and this is a good one to ask Spacecomms questions on Friday. Oftentimes Jonas is here with us. Jonas Dottel is the developer of Spacecomms, or one of the developers of Spacecomms, and there have been a variety of people that are testing it right now. It's still, I believe, web only. I think they're working on native apps. We've used it on a couple projects, and it's worked great. I mean, I think that there are some limitations to it being a web-based product. There are also some advantages of it being able to start up really quickly. It's got, it definitely comes from someone who does this a lot. So there's lots of little buttons and controls and pieces of it that that are available because you can tell someone who actually works in production and our kinds of production is building the comms, and so it really does feel like it's native to what we do. I think that they've just released an app for Zoom so that you can do talkback. We haven't started using it here, but we probably will in the next couple of weeks or months.
By the way, if you're new here and haven't noticed it yet, we are run entirely by your questions. And so if you'd like to ask questions into the show system, chat about them, vote on them, we have a system called Mukana, and you can get into that by heading over to officehours.global/join. We'll send you an email within a day or two, and once you've done that, you can ask, vote on, and discuss the show's questions. The voting part is important because we get to the ones with the most votes quickest and spend the most time talking about them. So that's Ask Office Hours. That's officehours.global/join. Try that out. Get into the system. Next question.
Coming in from the QR code, Marielle Shusha Miera in Wabalo writes in, came into school studio and Blackmagic web presenter with Terranex panel is dead. Not sending SDI, plug into front USB service port and load web presenter software. The box is detected. Try to update firmware and it gives an error. How do I fix this?
There's a couple of people going to help you here. Alex Lindsay will start you out.
3 letters for you. RMA.
Return merchandise authorization.
You can try to bounce it around, but I think that you're going to probably have to talk to Blackmagic about it. It could be a power supply issue. I believe that the newer web presenters are PoE, and to just make sure that it's not a PoE issue. But outside of that, if you've got a C13 plugged into it, that's the power cable. It should, if it's not working or if it's dead. And the question also is the panel dead or is the whole device dead? So the panel can die. I've never seen a panel die, but it could theoretically. It's a separate unit from the front piece. So can you actually? Is it actually still doing the thing? You said you can detect it, but is it still passing video? If it's still passing video, it may just be the panel that needs to be RMA'd as opposed to the whole unit.
Courtney Gooden?
Yeah, a couple of troubleshooting tips. I agree with Alex. It's probably a power supply issue. This is a dual power supply, if not triple, if it uses PoE. There is of course, your AC connector on the back, but then there's a 12-volt DC connector, which is a 4-pin XLR. Remember, pin 1 is ground, pin 4 is plus 12 volts. So if the panel is not lighting up, the Terranex panel in the front, which has the LCD on it, it's probably a power supply issue. But if you have to pull that panel off to plug into the USB connector on the front to do software updates. And I think it may give it enough power over the USB to do a firmware update in it, but not power up the rest of the machine. It's just designed for servicing. So I'd check the power supply, try a different power supply, try a 12-volt power supply into it if you're using AC, or an AC power supply into it if you're using DC, and see if you can get that front panel to light up. And then once you get all that stuff working, get it powered, then you can remove that front panel and try and do a firmware update when the whole thing is powered up. That's my guess as to what may be wrong. But you didn't tell us on what dead means. Is the whole thing dead? Is it just not outputting? What's up?
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, they mentioned that the firmware gives an error, so obviously it's getting power. So we've got that part. We've crossed that road. Sometimes it's good to go back and see if there was a previous firmware that you might have missed and update one of those other ones. Also trying on a Mac versus a PC or vice versa. So I would try those things. If it's just not sending out SDI, if it previously was, I'd also just check the cables because it's an in device. So the web presenter, that SDI is an input, and the out would be a loop through. So check both your cables, using a decimator or something like that. Because if you're able to see it on the network and try to update the firmware, obviously you're getting something. But yeah, other than those 3 or 4 tips, do what Alex said and send it back.
Next question.
Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies writes in, came across this phone mount for sports live streaming where there is a chain link fence. Thoughts? And he includes a link to an Instagram post.
Courtney Gooden, did you take a look at this?
Yeah, boy, reminded me how much I hate Instagram. Just all the it's hard to see everything if it's vertical, and trying to show it here. I think you can kind of see what it looks like on this one on the left. But it's a stamped out of metal cage that has hooks on the front of it that hold it onto the fence. You can see it. I think. Oh, great! Thank you. I think this is the mom on that '70s show, isn't it? Well, anyway, there you can kind of see it here. You can't really see it clearly in any of these Instagrams. But it seems like a lot of overkill just to hang your phone on a fence. I think a simpler approach would be just to get a urethane case for your phone and get a couple of paper clips and poke some holes in the corners and just hang it on the fence with the cameras looking through one of the things. Yeah. So seems like a lot of effort to hang a phone on a fence with the cameras peeking through one of the holes.
Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, there's a lot of good and bad to this. So this is what the video that the Instagram that was pointed to. So basically, hangs on the fence. Put your phone in through just a regular phone mount. There's a secondary phone mount underneath, or at least a screw hole, so you could actually put in a battery to keep your camera going. For the average person, just like Courtney said, I think this is way too big for somebody that's just going to carry it around. For those that are starting to use phones for things like actual production, put NDI on it, and then, of course, have a 2 to 3 camera system. This might actually be pretty decent. The other thing that I'm more concerned about is somebody coming up to the fence and just starting to shake the fence, because that's just going to mess up whatever shot you're going to take through the fencing to begin with. So,
if it's foul ball, you could take out a phone. It'd be a great shot, though. Alex Lindsay?
I saw one of these in action, and here are some of the. I have to admit that I walked over and asked the guy, "What are you doing? like what is going on with this box over here?" So one of the advantages is that it will actually adhere to, or not here, but it'll hook onto soft fences. So if you have a batting cage and you have a soft grid and not a hard chain link fence, there's a lot of mounts There's a lot of mounts, and this is actually a bigger business than you would think. And the reason for that is that a lot of teams use it they're using their iPhones for slow motion and other things when they're doing batting and other things like that. So they're actually doing a lot of analysis. So teams use these as an analysis tool. They rarely use them as entertainment tools, actually. And they've got a variety of different software that lets you control the camera remotely, so they can not have it shake around. And usually they're used in practice more than this one was shown in. The one I saw was at an actual game. But they said, we use it in practice all the time. And they use it, they put it in an angle so that they can look at the batter mechanics. This is what it was used for in this case. Turns out that the iPhone is exceptional at high speed. So they were shooting 240 frames a second of the kids batting and talking about their, what they were doing and everything else. I saw it take what looked like a near direct hit from a foul ball, and it didn't. Now, of course, it's off to one angle, so it wasn't, as hard as it could be hit. Phone seemed fine. It just swung around, and the phones are actually designed to take some pretty hard hits. Being dropped is not actually the same as being hit by a baseball. So, and the phone was in some kind of OtterBox as well, so it's not like it was exposed. I think that it's pretty nifty. It's got the battery mount below it. You'll see that there is a battery. You have this battery mount below it. Makes a lot of things convenient. Does it feel like a lot? Here you can see that they're using it for batting, mechanics there. And when they had it set up, that wasn't a very good job of that. When they had it set up, it was really, that's a good example of, what the scary things. But a lot of these are being used for analysis. They're not being used during the game. They're not for entertainment. They're for teams to figure out how to, look at mechanics and review them later. And the phones have turned out to be the cheapest, best way to get very high frame rate analysis tools available. There's other cameras available, but they're a lot harder to use, and everybody has the phones laying around.
Scott M. Davis.
So lots and lots of folks in my world are using phones for vertical video right now, and not this product, but something like it has shown up in a lot of venues that I've been in, outdoor venues. The phones are pretty disposable, pretty quick and easy to get rid of, so if something happens to them, nobody cares. Typically, somebody is nearby and keeping an eye on them, but they've had phones go away and they don't care. They're on record basically all the time. They're streaming out somewhere else. People using them, so cases like this are showing up for people to record specific areas on the pitch, specific areas of play in a football match, so they can just have it for later on, use it for social media, not during a game for broadcast, but like something just to use. The conditions are pretty wet, pretty heavy environmental, so just a case like that just keeps it nice and safe, keeps it robust. if they lose a phone, they don't care. What they're using is a manufactured thing. It's made out of plastic and aluminum. It's good enough to be robust. So something like this, it's pretty common, but you know, I haven't seen this specific product. I don't know if it's weatherproof or not, but the idea of having the battery holder under it is pretty good, not bad. So the idea is solid. People have used it. Application seems okay.
Next question.
Coming in from the QR code, Ola P. in Kent, United Kingdom writes in, any ideas on how to merge two stream sources into one output? We have two camera positions that are far away. We want to connect both to a switcher and send the output of the switcher via HDMI or as a stream into another switcher or vMix input.
Kai Cochran's going to start things off for you. Kai?
Yeah, if you have access to another switcher, of course, you could do like a sub switch. So I would just stick something in front, or if you have a little bit more funding, you would get something more appropriate like, this one is less expensive, $295 for this thing called the Freak Show, which is one out, four ins. You also have the video hubs from all the different manufacturers, which will allow you, 10, 20, 40, 80 by 80 or 120 by 120. So depending on your budget and how you want to do this, you would just stick a sub switcher in front of it and take the input that way.
Alex Lindsay.
It depends. I know this is our favorite answer. How far away are those cameras? When you say they're far, are these like miles of far away? Hundreds of feet, thousands of feet? You're in the United Kingdom. Hundreds of meters, thousands of meters, kilometers. What is the distance that you're trying to cover? Because if they're truly like you're trying to connect them to two different things and stream them, then you may be doing some kind of SRT delivery. Whereas if you're still running a cable, then it's just deciding what you want to do here. It looks like you go to what Guy said. I mean, you would be getting them back and putting them into something like a little atem switcher, and then running them into vMix or another switcher there. But how far do you have to go to get those cameras? And that's the big question that I'm not clear of.
And Mickey Bakajor in the chat said, seems like a lot of overthinking and overcomplicating things. Just run fiber lines for each camera. Armored fiber is inexpensive, and tack fiber does not cost much more. So
Mickey said what I was gently going towards. You may just want to put fiber on either end.
Yeah. Courtney Gooden wants to weigh in. Courtney?
I was trying to find one, but when they made 4K came out, they had little converter boxes out there that would take two 1080p maybe 4 1080p signals and put them into a 4K 12 gigabit signal and send them down one piece of coax, one SDI connection. So maybe that's what he's looking for, with a single cable to carry both cameras so that you could still switch between them remotely without having to put a switcher on the other end and choose, or maybe have access to both at the same time to put them in a multi-view. But just have one cable. I don't know if that's what he's talking about, but there used to be solutions out there that would take two 1080p signals and superimpose them on a single signal, 4K signal, and send them out.
Jeffrey Powers?
Yeah, from what Courtney said, I have a couple of those. The biggest problem is, especially if you're getting generic versions, is they might run at a different frame rate, and then all of a sudden you're running into problems trying to pull it into whatever device like the atem to receive it. The other thing is, if you're going in long distances, you want to make sure that if you might have to repeat the signal as you go. So if we're talking like a couple hundred feet and you're just thinking, I want to spread like an Ethernet cable or a long cable from there, you'll probably have to create some repeat points so it'll get through. And then finally, cable management. If there's no place to put the cable, you got to figure out how to gaff it down or put padding down or something, so when people step on the cable, they don't interrupt the signal or break the cable altogether.
Alex, do you want to get back in?
Yeah, and if it's a long distance and you have line of sight, just remember that there are wireless solutions as well that you can use, that you could theoretically put it on and have it throw along a long distance, and you're still feeding it back to a switcher, but you might be able to cover it if actually running cable is difficult.
Next question.
Robert Linkroom in Belmont Shore, California asks, is the Blackmagic Design 2110 IP converter 3x3G the easiest way to convert PoE plus video signals to SDI video via BNC to then ingest into the switcher?
Alex Lindsay?
It depends on what the format is. So what we don't know here from your question is what it's a PoE. I guess 2110 is what you're talking about there. So it might be the easiest if everything else is black magic. If you're trying to do that there. So we'd have to know a little bit about what else you're trying to. I think when you're saying PoE video signals, what you mean is 2110 going via a PoE connection to some cameras. But let us know what your pipeline looks like a little bit more clearly, and we'll see if we can answer that more specifically.
By the way, if you want to get a question in quick, sometimes quick, you can use our QR code or just go to askofficehours.global. Type that into any web browser. That'll get you in there, askofficehours.global. Here's the QR code in the corner of the screen if you want to take a picture of that. You can use that. It takes you directly into the system. Somebody will take a look at those questions. They'll make sure, and this is kind of always important for our questions, that it's concise. You're asking one question per admission. You don't put 3 or 4 in there because we won't get to those. Those will kind of get shuffled to the side. But if you do that, even if you don't want to use the back-end system in Mukana, you can do this, askofficehours.global. Next question.
Coming in for the QR code, Chuck Hodges in Tuolumne, California writes in, Alex, what is your audio chain and how has it changed? It just doesn't sound good. It's clippy and staticky. Everyone else sounds perfectly clean and clear. Refresh the YouTube too.
I'll
Alex?
have to look. I don't know if I'm clipping. I'm not clipping here, so I'm not sure exactly where that would be clipping there. And I don't hear it, so I'll have to go back and look at the YouTube. Sometimes you might hear static because I have a bad habit of putting my phone on on the top of my 205, and it does. So I got to stop doing that because I have noticed that you can hear some of the cell coverage in it if I do that. The only thing that changes is SM7B instead of some of the other mics that I've used in the past. I don't hear it, and I've listened to it on YouTube. It didn't sound. I didn't hear the static. So we'll keep on looking at it. Next question.
Coming in from the QR code, Curtis Perrin in Newfoundland, Canada. What is the best way to handle up to 12 rooms with live simultaneous translation with remote interpreters? Multiple Zoom accounts, or is there a tier in Zoom that can do this with a minimal amount of accounts?
Alex Lindsay's going to help you out. Alex?
Yeah, so I wouldn't use Zoom for this. I mean, it depends on how many, but once you start to get to, it depends on how many interpretations you're trying to do. So Zoom may work fine. The challenge is you have simultaneous translation, but how many remote participants how many languages are you doing? Are you doing one language, the UN6, 12 languages, 20 languages? We've seen all of that stuff done, and typically that hasn't really been done by it hasn't been delivered. It's been used. Folks have been using Unity for that, for really high numbers, high counts of returns. So that has been a mixture of Unity Connect and Unity Comms to send that audio out to translators and have them do the translation, have the audio come back. And then what has been done in the past, if you're trying to do a lot of translations, you end up embedding those back into the SDI signal. You can do up to 16. Well, you can do stereo plus 14 languages on an SDI signal, and there's a Dante to SDI embedder that you can get that would take everything out of Dante from your mixer, feed it into and embed those, so you can get up to 15 languages or so on one SDI. You then stream that. If you have an encoder that can handle 16 channels, you can stream that into AWS or another cloud platform, and from there, pick those off and stream them out to individual outputs. If you are trying to do it with multiple rooms, then you don't really necessarily need a multiple Zoom accounts. You can have one account, so they have lots of meetings that you open up. You might have to have different accounts to open those up. But what I'm saying is that you don't have to have a different business to do that. But still, we haven't used Zoom or Skype. I used to have stacks of Skype boxes only to do this. So I used to have 6 Skype TX boxes that each had 4 inputs, and that was just to do 24 rooms at the same time for captioning and sometimes interpretation. And so it can be used that way. Sometimes the interpreters want to see video. That's the big advantage of using something like Zoom or other things, is they want to see what's going on while they're interpreting. But really, it has to do with how many languages are you doing, and how you're going to try to get those back.
Guy Cochran?
Yeah, if it's getting overwhelming and really complicated for you and you feel like you just want to pass the ball to somebody else, I would highly recommend talking to Tucker at BSCMP Global, where I've been in productions where we have basically a lobby where we have all these interpreters coming in, and then we just push them into a breakout room. So they're all labeled, and the second those people come in, we do a nice, hey, how you doing? Which company, or actually we'll have a sheet with all the different names that we're expecting and which room that they're going into. Then we throw them in that room, and in that room is another vMix instance that's able to grab their audio and give them a program feed. So they're able to see the show, but then we're able to grab their audio and push it back to wherever it needs to go. So Tucker is just a master at this. I mean, we'll spin up 20 different vMix instances just to make this happen. So instead of buying 20 computers, just hire Tucker. He's already got the infrastructure. So I would recommend reaching out to them.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, Tucker is a good choice, I'd imagine. I think, AI is getting better and better at real-time interpretation, and I don't think it will be long before those multiple interpreters may be looking for other work. There is a company out there called Interpify that offers this as a service to do what you're talking about, that they can supply multiple streams of different interpreters. And it says here, I'm not sure whether they're using live interpreters. They interface with Zoom and any of the web type conferencing software. It says they have over 6,000 pro interpreters for any spoken or signed language. And it does say AI-powered captioning for live translation options. So maybe they're using AI, or maybe they're using live translators with digital connections. But you offer them up the information on your event, and they will give you a bid back. I have not used them, but I did find them as a possible solution if you don't want to set up a permanent infrastructure like this for doing this multiple times.
Alex?
And what was that service again, Courtney?
It's called Interpify.
Oh, Interpify, yeah. Yeah, and then also in Europe, Robert Sababity is in our group, and that's his specialty is interpretation. So that if you're in Europe, that might be another solution to check out as well.
Next question.
Coming in from the QR code, Raina Dabapopoulos in Scituate writes in, how will the death of the USAID affect media production and campaigns in the U.S. and worldwide? How will it affect jobs and careers in the industry and associated ones like the theater and live events and streaming all over the world and in the U.S.?
Alex Lindsay.
I don't think it's going to have any major effect on those things, except for the people who have those contracts. So, I mean, it's not like USAID is a big media organization. They do a fair amount of media, but they don't. I don't think that. Obviously, this is a big example of why not even if it's a government, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So if you're, if this is the only client you have, it's going to affect you a lot. But I don't think it's going to have any general impact on the industry.
Next question.
Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri writes in, I've been asked to produce an event for $20,000. Quick napkin math suggests $60,000 would be a safe estimate. In these situations, how do you assess whether it's worth spending your time on bidding and negotiating, etc.?
And Chris Fenwick's going to help you out. Chris?
I think, Aaron, I think a difference of 3 to 1, like your math is figuring, is pretty alarming. And it may very well be that the most appropriate thing for you to say is, "I'm sorry, I can't help you." If you get sucked into a job that's horribly underfunded, besides being underfunded, you're likely going to have a really bad time. Now, it might end up being an amazing experience for you, but if it's that underfunded, you really need to understand your own self-worth and the worth of your company, and you might be better off taking the time that you would be wrapped up doing this underfunded job and just find better jobs. There are occasions where you can sit down with people and make an argument for why they shouldn't do this job in the way that they think they can do it. And a lot of times when somebody says, "Well, this is our budget," it's just because they have no idea. They just have no idea. And so by presenting your case well, you can greatly change the outcome of a show. I was involved in a show years ago. It was the launching of one of the tech TV channel things, like I can't remember what they were called in San Francisco. And these people had budgeted to do this little fly pack show, and they started explaining what they wanted to do. And I said, you can't do that. You just can't. And I said, how many times are you going to launch your channel? They were launching a brand new channel like Tech TV or whatever. And I said, how many times are you going to launch your channel? You probably want it to go well, and this is what you need to do. And by the end of the day, the budget for that show had like literally 10x'd because I presented the case. I said, this is what you're going to need to do. This is how it's going to have to happen. And anything less than that, you're going to fall on your face, and I don't think you want to do that. So,
Alex Lindsay. Oh, excuse me, Chris.
No, I'm done. I'm rambling.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, when someone asks for a bid, I give them a bid. This is what it costs. Based on what we had, the conversation we had, this is how much it's going to cost. And if someone's come back and wants it to be less, usually I say, well, what are we taking out? I don't adjust my budgets up because you're a big company or I think you have a lot of money. I just tell you how much it's going to cost for me to do it. And so it's in that world, there's some people I know that will adjust based on the size of the company or whatever. I don't do any of those things. I just kind of, well, this is how much it costs to get done. This is what it takes us for us to do it. And if you want it to be less, we'll take things out and make it simpler and maybe make it less expensive. And then I leave them with that and have those conversations. Part of our job is to have these conversations, and some of them are going to be dead ends. But you don't know whether they're dead ends now or not, because if someone goes out on what really should be $60,000 and they do it for $20,000, the chances are it's going to look pretty rough, and it's probably going to have some failures, and they're probably going to wish that they hadn't done that most of the time. And the worst part is that might work the first time, and then they get excited and expand and promote it, and then it doesn't work the second time because if someone's bidding for sunny days, eventually there'll be a rainy one. And then that's when you get the work back. And everyone's so much nicer after they've used somebody else and it's failed. They're all much more, they're much more open to your options. So I just do what I need to do there. And we've had this happen probably at least once a quarter that we bid higher than someone expected. They went off and did it some other way. And they come back and say, so how are we going to, what would you do there? So.
Scott M. Davis.
So I'm a consultant. I work in a slightly different field than Alex does, but I know what I'm worth. I know what people like me are worth. I also know what it costs for me to feed my family. And if somebody comes back and goes, well, I can only afford this much, I go, well, I can't do it for that. It is not worth my health or my time to try and go backwards into somebody else's budget if I can't afford to do it for that value. I've got other stuff I can go do. My concern when anybody says to me, "Oh, well, I've only got this much budget. Can you still do it?" It's like, well, no, I can't. I can't afford to decrease the value of my time or the quality of my work to fit somebody else's budget, because that decreases the value that I offer to the industry going forward. So I appreciate that people go, "Hey, I've got a limited budget. I can only do this." I get it. I understand. People do have finite budgets, but I also have to maintain the quality of my work and the quality of my value to the industry by not trying to decrease what I offer. So yeah, it's not just a challenge of like, hey, what have you got? It's also, what am I going to present in the future? And if I do it cheaply this time and I kind of get away with it, eventually that's going to catch up to me and the quality of my work is going to suffer, and I'm going to make my value to the industry worse. So I always get worried when somebody comes back with a really low ball bid. So yeah, take a look at their bid or take a look at their value. If you want to submit a bid, but submit a real bid. Don't try and back into their number.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, and usually I don't even get numbers, so I don't even know what their number is. And if they give it to me, if they give me the number ahead of time, what I'll do is scale down I'll scale down what I'm offering, saying this is what you can do for that number, because I can do something for $20,000. It just depends on it may not be what they had put in the RFP, but I can get it to there. And then oftentimes, if they come back and say, well, this person bid, this is the dangerous part with me, is if you say this person bid this much, I said, well, what did they bid? Like, what did they promise? And then I'll pick out the 3 things that will go wrong in your event. And then I let them go ahead and do the event. and I'm pretty accurate about which problems they're going to have based on the budget and based on what they said they were going to do. So I think, again, you got to bid on it. Now, I will say, I do some events for very little money, just cost less than, like just razor thin, because there's something I'm interested in figuring out. So if I've got the time and I've got the resources, then one of the advantages of owning a bunch of gear is that you can say, oh, I'll throw 18 cameras at something, or I'll do something else that doesn't take a lot of people. So I've definitely done those jobs because they don't have a big budget, and I'm interested in that market. And so if you're interested, that's the other side of this, is that even though I generally have a certain thing, if they're asking me to do something new that I'm trying to figure out, I may get really flexible about it, especially if there's no travel and there's no extra crew. I can get pretty flexible because I want to know how to do that thing. And oftentimes I can turn that as a quote unquote test into business down the road.
I will just note one little thing that was very successful for me over the course of all the productions that I did. I used to put a fee at the top of my sheet, production fee, and I would tell them in the very first meeting, that's what you're paying me to do this. That was after the scope of work was outlined to me. In hundreds of jobs, I never had anybody ask me to cut my production fee, not once. We talked about everything below that line and down in the base, how many days, how many cameras, how many people. All the rest of that was always on the table if they needed to save some money somewhere. But that fee represented what I needed to support my life and make my life work for that amount of time. And it was interesting. I expected often some of the harder negotiators on this side of the table to ask me to mess with that. They never did. So this is a support for know what you're worth, and put it up front and make them push if they're going to. But like I said, they never did. Next question.
Coming in from the QR code, John Slater in Dallas, Texas asks, for houses of worship on a shoestring budget, what are the AI tracking 20x zoom SDI plus NDI PTZ, think PTZ Optics like at auto tracking, and what would be the next step up that would improve image quality, bearing in mind low cost?
Jeffrey Powers.
To start with the first part, there's three things that you need to be concerned about. One is lighting. Two is how many people are in the shot. And three is if you're expecting this to be a set and forget type situation, that's never going to happen. What I like to do is I like to put it on, when I use AI, I use lighted stage where it's a lot darker. So if somebody steps off stage, the camera will always reset to the front point until it starts to see a new person from there. Having one person, even though some of these PTZ cameras say that, oh, we can follow the person even if somebody's following in the background, you just can never trust it. And that's why the third part, never set and forget, because AI is basically notorious for wandering around from there. For PTZ Optics, you specifically said that they do have what's called the camera management tool, which is a piece of software that works with a lot of the PTZ Optics cameras that allows the AI tracking to happen, even if the camera didn't have AI tracking to begin with. So I've used that in a couple situations, but once again, it starts to wander. You're going to have to put it back into its position. Finally, I want to show you a camera here, and that's this one. This is not PTZ Optics. This is HuddleCam, their sister company. And what this is the Simple Track 3. And the cool thing about this guy is right here. There's a secondary camera on here, and that secondary camera is watching the area that you have set. So this basically works best if it's set center to wherever you want to record from there. So this will watch the area. You set the zones through this camera. And the cool thing about this camera is not only will it set a zone, but it'll also set this an area. So like, for instance, if they walk over to like a whiteboard, I'm just going to talk with presenters. If they walk over to a whiteboard, you can actually set it up so it will center it. It knows it's at the whiteboard. Instead of following the person, it will actually just set it to the whiteboard. So then they'll work. And then when they start to walk away from the whiteboard, it'll start to follow them again. I have a full video on this on the Simple Track. So check that out from HuddleCam HD. Just the whole idea that there's two cameras, one that's working to do the movement, and the other one that's actually doing the AI functionality, really makes a difference.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, I'd say that you're taking away a position from somebody that wants to volunteer, and if you don't like people management, then the AI is going to bite you at that low level. If you want the next tier up, take a look at Panasonic's offerings. Although the thing with these is that with Panasonic, you have to have a PC that's very expensive, software with a GPU. This whole package winds up being very expensive. The newer cameras, like the Sony AM7, that have the integration built in, so the intelligence for the AI auto tracking is inside of the box. So then when you ask for what the next level up is, it's kind of this buy once, cry once thing, because I just came from a very large church here in Seattle, and these cameras will sit in that facility for 5+ years. So if you're, and still be actively in use. So if you're going to ask for the money once, may as well just go up to the top tier. Last year at Infocom, they had a shootout. They took us into this private room, and we got to see all these different auto tracking competitors versus the Sony. And I can tell you the Sony just dominates. And I know that they set it up for their stuff specifically, but they had 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, and it was magic. So there's some videos online. Just search for Sony BR7, BR-AM7 auto tracking, and you'll see what I'm talking about as far as how good this stuff can be if you want to go to that level. But otherwise, also look at just getting multiple cameras if you want to stick with the PTZ Optics line, or get a nice controller, and again, let that volunteer have at it, and or multiple cameras so you can just cut away to the next shot. And just depends on how you want your productions to flow.
Alex, real quick.
If you're not, if you don't have viewership over 40% of your total runtime, think about whether it's worth doing. So that's the other thing to look at, is look at your average view time across, whatever platform you're using. Make sure that you're seeing, at least, minimum of a third of the show should be being watched across the total runtime. If you're not getting to those numbers, you may want to think about the entire structure. A lot of times, really shoestring coverage of any event, including House of Worship, the average view time is very low because it's just very hard to watch. If you are going to have really low budgets and small cameras, really beef up on the audio, because a lot of people just listen to it. So really make sure that your audio sounds really, really clean, and the video, in some cases, doesn't matter. Most people who are watching House of Worship are listening to it; they're not watching it.
If you're finding value in what you're learning here on Office Hours and you want to help us out, there are a couple of ways you can help. You can like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can volunteer at officehours.global. And if you do volunteer, I got to tell you, the experience across the board from everybody I talk to, and for myself personally, is you learn so much being involved with these extraordinary people who you will find yourself working alongside with, shoulder to shoulder, in our volunteer efforts and things like that. If you want to do that, please also consider donating to officehours.global/donate. So those are the 3 ways you can kind of be personally involved: subscribe, volunteer, or donate. Next question.
Paul Kovacs in Elkhart, Indiana asks, what is a good yet inexpensive HDMI splitter the panel recommends? Need to go from a computer to 2 TVs and don't want to let them use my expensive atem ISO Extreme just for this. Thanks.
Alexander Knight's going to help you out here. Alexander?
I've bought a number of these types of splitters over the years, $25 to $40, and I've never been satisfied with any of them. Yes, they split the signal, but the color quality I find usually suffers on a lot of these cheaper ones. So I recommend spending a little bit more money, and yes, it seems like overkill, but a small HDMI matrix like the ones from TestSmart I've had really good experience with, and I've never found that when I put a signal into it, what comes out looks exactly the same. So TestSmart 4x4 matrix is actually on sale right now. And they've slashed the price quite a bit from $239 to $167. So and this offers more features than just splitting the signal. So I would look at something like this.
Courtney Gooden.
Well, you didn't say what the resolution of your monitors are. I assume these days, if they're large monitors, they're 4K. I've had, unlike Alexander, apparently, I've had good luck with just the Chinese splitters. Now, this is just not extending your monitors, not a matrix switch. But there's a bunch of them on Amazon. This is a 1x4 4K for $18. Certainly a lot cheaper. And these splitters, and this one also has the ability to daisy chain them. So if you want to add more later, you can hook in multiple of these and cascade them out because they understand the impedance change. And these are strict digital duplications. They shouldn't affect your color at all. And of course, I think you have to manage EDIDs, and this one uses, I believe, the first monitor number one output to pull the EDID from, and it uses the same settings for all the others. So as long as your televisions have the same resolution and the same frequency, if they're the same brand, that's even better. Then you shouldn't have any problem in sending the same signal out to all of them. And another warning, if you're in the United States, and I see you are, don't order anything that is shipped from China, because you will probably not receive it, because it's coming in over the de minimis rule, which is just the post office has now declared as of 2 days ago they will not deliver any.
I think that they turned that back on again. I think they now post office.
I think that lasted like an hour.
Yeah, it lasted. Yeah. It went off. There was a bunch of announcements, and then it came back on.
All right. There's so much posturing going on. I can't.
You're so 48 hours behind. With this new
time is it? What are the rules?
What is the rule right now?
But anyway, they're on Amazon where they're in stock, and delivery today, same day. So if I order it this morning, I can have it this afternoon. I can test it out, and if it doesn't work, I can send it back and get all my money back within a day.
Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, if you're talking 4K or 8K signal, that becomes a problem. It might work now, but then a month down the road, all of a sudden, it doesn't work from those types of things. I'm going to give you an alternate idea, and that is NDI. If you're wired or wireless, it kind of works from there. It's not going to give you a 4K signal, and definitely not going to give you 8K signal. But if you just want like a 1080p video, you're doing YouTube videos or something like that, you could try that. You could use your Apple TV. There's an app that will capture the NDI for the TV, or something like a Zowie box, or Magewell has the NDI to HDMI converters that will then plug into the TV. You can split that in multiple ways, so multiple TVs get the exact same signal from there. You don't have to run any cable.
Next question.
Coming in from the QR code, Marieli Shushamiera in Wabalo asks, vMix calls aren't supported by Multicorder. We tried recording 5 ISOs and switched the feed, but get frame drops and multiple files that we have to sew together in Premiere. Livemind NDI recorder does the same. Any other options or workarounds to record 5 calls?
Alex Lindsay.
vMix call is unstable? Shocked. Shocked. So there are different levels of this. Of course, if you're doing 5 calls at the same time, then the thing that we would use typically is Zoom ISO for this. For 1 call at a time or a handful of calls at a time, we would probably use Riverside if we're recording them, because it's going to record locally. We're going to get better audio. We use Zoom ISO for this all the time, and then we either output that via NDI, we do it via Siphon, or we send it out via SDI to an external recorder. If you do it to an external recorder, no matter what hiccups you get on Zoom or whatever, all of that stuff's going to stay lined up. So it just depends on how much money you want to spend and how stable you want it to be.
Guy Cochran?
Yep, I was going to say the same thing. It's one of those things where look at what's working, and Zoom we know works for sure. If you put too much load on a computer, especially an older one, you're going to get these drop frames. So I would also look at Task Manager to see where you're at as far as what is causing those drop frames. Is it the network, or can you pass off another vMix machine that does some of the ingest and then kick it over NDI, and that's lighter weight, and then do the cutting and recording on another machine. So you might need to segment things if you want. If you're just looking for an alternative today, I would say go Zoom and just use the native vMix integration. You don't have to get crazy. Like so my setup is Zoom ISO with a Mac Mini M4 and then a quad card and a Sonnet box, and then I'm able to record all those into a hardware. So that's another option if you want to get crazy.
Alex Lindsay, you want to come back in?
Yeah, and just to repeat the mantra for anyone doing production is that your target for your computer when doing vMix or anything else should be 40% of the CPU capacity, and you should not exceed 60% of the CPU capacity. That's how you do production with a with software, is to make sure that you have plenty of headroom, because when it runs out of headroom is when it starts to do what you're seeing.
Next question.
from the QR code. Onel Mesa in Atlanta asks, coming back to Vision Pro content, I just saw a review on a new consumer pro camera, Slam Xcam, which will shoot 8K stereo. Do you think there will be a good quality content, 3D 180 content made so soon to fill the lack of content?
Scott M. Davis, your thoughts?
So, number one, and I've talked about this with Alex before, I am not a fan of the headsets, but I love the Apple Vision Pro. I've seen it many, many times. I got to trial it several times. I know the guys who made it. It is a fantastic piece of kit. The biggest holdup with it is the lack of content. There isn't enough, and I don't think, whereas I'm thrilled with this camera coming out, and it's going to do a great thing for people to shoot more stuff, the biggest holdup is the commercialization of that content just isn't there. There aren't enough people doing it. In the world I work with, I know that people are doing more stuff with headsets to do more stuff with professional content. The Vision Pro is not the target they're aiming at. They're aiming at other devices. And when I ask why, it's always about rights and signing other deals. So it's just not getting the traction out there in the world I'm in. Now that's just one person's world. That's not every person's world. So I'm excited about this. I looked at it while we were chatting and I looked at the question. I'm thrilled with this. I think more content for that device is nothing but good. I really hope it takes off and I hope it fills more of that stuff and more people do more content for it. I love that device. As a guy who really hates headsets, I love it. So more is better. Alex Lindsay.
Yeah. Love the headset. And I agree with Scott that it is the problem really is that is related to this is content. I will say that, a lot of people say, well, we can't stream to the Vision Pro because there's only 400,000 users. I'm like, well, how many times have you done a stream for 400,000 people, especially in VR? Like, I know that there's other VR tools, but how many of them? Because most of the streams for other VR headsets have been in the hundreds. And the first time we did a spatial stream from Twit, we had 650 people in Apple Vision Pros watching the show. So it's not that there's not, and what our goal, what we're looking at is how do we get to a point where we can have a, couple thousand willing to pay for something and we can do it cost effectively with a single camera. Because I think the mistake you see a lot of times when people building content is they're trying to cut between a whole bunch of cameras, and I'm not sure if that's valid. The Slam Cam here is what it's $1,000. It says 8K 30. I will say that from my experience of doing this I've been doing this type of content creation for about 10 years. 30 is a deal breaker. Like as soon as I saw 30, I was like, not interested. It's the problem with VR is it's not film and you need high frame rate. 60 is minimal viable product. 90 is really where you need to start building for, and 120 is where we're trying to get to. The camera that's coming out, their timing is a little rough too. The camera that's coming out before NAB or near NAB will be the Blackmagic Dual 180. It's doing 8K per eye like this one with much better glass at 90 frames a second. And and this is going to, I believe, usher in a huge explosion of content, both for the Meta platform as well as Apple's platform, because finally we have the resolution and the frame rate that these headsets really need. So I think you're going to see more it has been an art project for the last 20 years for us to create stills or video in 360 or dual 180. Apple bought NextVR maybe a decade ago. So that if you wonder how long Apple's been working on the headset, they bought NextVR 10 years ago. This is content is coming. A lot of us are jockeying for position, sharp elbows, trying to get these cameras first. We think there'll be a small number of cameras available sometime in the spring, more in the summer. By the end of the year, you should see an enormous amount of content that's coming out for these headsets because we finally have a camera, not only a camera, but the workflow. So the Resolve workflow of I'm shooting with this camera. It's delivering content in a format that has been in a product that is designed to work with that content and deliver it out. We haven't had that ever before. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be pretty exciting.
Jeffy Powers, real quick.
Yeah, doubling down on what Alex said with the 30 frames a second. The device is actually really nice. It's on a Snapdragon 8. It is going to be an Android device for sure, and of course you can edit right from the device. So if you're out in like a CES or anything like that, NAB, you'll be able to shoot, edit, and then push out as quick as possible. So for stuff like that, it might be perfect for that. But yeah, I would want to have something with a higher frame rate and be able to, and unless you can do 4K at 60 or 4K or 1080p at 120, then all of a sudden that might be a little bit of a game changer.
Guy Cochran?
Yeah, and the Meta Quest, they have 20 million plus users, so there's already tons of content being created, especially with Canon now coming out with the EOS R5C and Hugh Howe doing all these videos on how to capture this kind of content and the workflows with DaVinci Resolve. But watching some of this stuff, like that the pros will go to an underwater place like the Bahamas or something like that and shoot this. It is expensive to go on these trips, take all these people with you, go underwater, have all the dive tanks and everything. So it's the cost of production, and a lot of these folks have been banking this stuff away for years now. It's just when's the monetization going to catch up to be able to produce this content, because there's 20 million users plus, and Facebook's a daily place for a lot of people. So being able to get all those people into the ecosystem is already happening on the Facebook Quest.
Alex, final note?
Yeah, the hilarious problem that Meta's had in the past is that they're building all their content for 18 to 30, while all the people who own the headsets, who can afford the headsets, are 30 and above. And so they can't figure out why there's only hundreds of people showing up for these concerts. I think that what some of us are going to be doing is focusing on serving the actual market that actually has the headsets, and seeing if they'll actually show up for things. But that's been the huge problem with the content, is that Meta is really focused on using the headsets to go after a market that doesn't exist. And I think I think Apple's done a little bit of the same thing. So when the cameras become more available to a wider number of people and it's easier to produce, I think you're going to see a much wider group. And I think you're going to see those of us in the over 35 category getting served a lot more effectively, because we're the ones that actually have the headsets.
If your question didn't make it into the show today, our apologies. We do get more questions and we have possible time to answer, so that happens. If you use the Makana system, they will be pushed back into your notes field, so you can pull them back out and use them another time if you still have that unanswered question. If you use the QR code system, they do not do that, but they stay persistently in that. So just keep watching, and hopefully we will get to them as soon as we can. Thank you to everybody who's involved in the show, to all the producers who ask the questions that drive our show every day. We truly can't do this show without you. For the panelists who show up and freely contribute their expertise to answering your questions, our panelists are amazing people, and so thank you one and all. And to the unsung heroes in the back end, our crew and the virtual people all over the world making office hours happen every single day. Literally, I'm not being figuratively, all over the world. Likely the person who was connecting you to these different views of panelists and things like that could be in any place on the planet. It's an amazing system that we operate here, and we appreciate everybody who touches it, no matter what they do. The Tolak Traversal today, if you had needed to go get these answers from the people and needed to travel to them, you would have traveled 28,000 miles. That's 45,000 kilometers, 221 million bananas for scale. That's our show for today. We'll see you tomorrow.
Can't wait to get that camera. Can't wait to get that camera.
Figure out if it's dual 8K or
it's dual 8K. 90 frames a second.
8K. The amount
90
of
frames a second.
8K
the bandwidth coming off of that
17K
frame.
sensor. It's a 17K
crazy.
sensor.
So I will tell you, Alex, I was on a call with somebody yesterday who's actually filming huge areas, and they're turning it into point clouds. Like, they're turning the images into point clouds and they're rendering it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're specifically building it for markets like this. So it's not like a synthetic image. It's a synthetic image of a real thing.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
We've done that for a while. Microsoft had a really great team that worked on it. Bill Crow